Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel, Prove All Things Eschatology. And we're going to just jump right into this next topic. And it is, again, a controversial one, which is fine. We're not going to shy away from controversy. We're going to deal with what the scriptures say and hopefully allow them to lead us to a proper conclusion. And if that's controversial, then that's controversial. And so the topic of today is the most convincing Old Testament passage supporting the pre-trib rapture. I'm going to tell you right off the bat that most people who oppose the idea of a pre-trib rapture will tell you there's not a single passage in the entire Bible that supports the idea of a pre-trib rapture. It was invented. We're going to be talking about that just a little bit as we kind of go into this passage. But when they hear me say Old Testament passage, their minds are blown because they think that the only place, and even some pre-trib rapture folks think that the only place that it was revealed is in the New Testament because of the term mystery that is often wrapped in this idea, in this doctrine. And just let me go ahead and tell you that anything that is in the New Testament is already in the Old Testament. It may not be obvious, right? Hence the mystery. It may not be revealed until the New Testament, but it's there. And we're going to take a look at that today because it's pretty convincing. In fact, I would say it is one of the more convincing passages in all of the Bible, Old Testament or New Testament, with regard to the pre-trib rapture. And so we're gonna read through that, and then I'm going to explain why I believe that it is talking about the pre-trib rapture. And I think it'll be fairly obvious once we get there. But the pre-trib rapture is one of the most vitriolic attacked doctrines in eschatology. And when I say, the most vitriolic attacked, what I mean is it is attacked with vigor. It is attacked with vitriol. It is attacked with almost like a violent type of argument. There are some people that are really, really opposed to even the idea of the pre-trib rapture. And many who do not believe in this doctrine, they'll gaslight it, they'll condemn it, they'll rail, they'll scream, they'll declare that those who believe in such thing are ignorant. They're Bible illiterate sheep who have been led astray by a 19th century preacher named Darby. I can't tell you how many times I've heard this argument. And this is usually the introduction to why they don't believe in the pre-trib rapture. So they give you all of the moral conclusions that they have come to as to why it can't be true, and then they read the Bible as if it is not true because it can't be true because it's immoral. I mean, literally, I've been told that if I believe in the pre-trib rapture, that I am blaspheming. So there are some very emotional, very strong opinions with regard to this. And this is very common. So, for example, William Lane Craig, who is a major proponent of the already not yet interpretive approach, I'm not going to get into what that is, but he's a major proponent of that idea. He's fairly well known in that circle. He says, and I quote, "The rapture is not a biblical doctrine. It was a doctrine invented in the 19th century by James Darby in Ireland." If you've ever seen the media, these media clips where an event happens and they all report it in the exact same way, almost as if they were given marching orders from some authority, whether it's ABC, NBC, CNN, CNBC, whatever news organization, and they would use the exact same terminology. And it is mind-blowing how many will use this terminology to first put on display why it's not true. It's not true because it was invented in the 19th century by James Darby. Now, I'm not going to get into that today. I'm going to do a series on that specifically, but I'm just going to mention that it was not invented by James Darby. That is, there's plenty of information out there that debunks that whole argument, but that's for another time. Another article online proclaims the Pretrib Rapture makes Jesus out to be a liar. And I have dealt with this in a previous video. I don't think I've uploaded it yet, but I've dealt with this. So listen, if all you guys out there who are adamant that there is no Pretrib Rapture, if a Pretrib Rapture does occur, it doesn't mean that Jesus lied. It means that you didn't understand. All right, let's just get that out of the equation. Jesus doesn't lie, and belief in a pre-trib rapture doesn't make him a liar, nor are we making him a liar. We're just giving our understanding of the scriptures, and we may be wrong. I may be completely wrong. I don't believe I am, based on everything that I know in all of my studies, which are decades in the making now. I don't believe I am, but I don't know everything. You know, anyone who says that they are 100% certain about eschatology, about their eschatological position, and they can't be wrong, is basically claiming that they understand every single passage in the Bible and every single interpretation that they have is infallible. They're telling you their interpretation is infallible. I can't even, it's not even worth discussing anything with those kind of people. So we're not making Jesus out to be a liar. If we're wrong, then we're wrong. And if you're wrong, Jesus isn't a liar. You're wrong. It's just that. All right, then, a very popular argument is that if you believe in the Pretrib Rapture, you're just sitting around twiddling your thumbs waiting to escape any tribulation. So they have what's called the escapism doctrine, that if you believe in the Pretrib Rapture, you're just trying to escape the tribulation. And it's not in a good way. Right? In fact, in a recent video with Jack Hibbs, who is pre-trib, he's in the Calvary Chapel movement, and Kirk Cameron, who used to be pre-trib, but got a hold of some post-mill books and turned post-mill. They were in a video together, and kudos to them. Just before I get into that, kudos to them for getting into a video together, having a conversation, knowing that one another disagrees with the other's eschatology. Truly, we need to be that way. And that's a great example for everyone who is taking a stance in a doctrine and accusing their brethren of some moral failing because they believe in something different. It's just ridiculous. But nevertheless, Kirk kept inferring that this is the problem with the pre-trib doctrine, that the power of the gospel is denied by those who believe in premill, and certainly by those who believe in pre-trib. So you have in premill, the premillennial view, which you have post-mill, post-trib, mid-trib, pre-wrath, and pre-trib. Those are the main ones, and then there's little scattered pieces in there. And he says, basically the problem with those is that there is no power in the gospel, that we have to wait until, we're going to fail. You'll hear that often. We're going to fail at bringing the gospel to the world, that the gospel will fail in achieving what God intended it to achieve. Again, it's a philosophical standard that is encasing their interpretations. And again, I'm gonna spend a lot more time on this, but this is what's going on out there. And in fact, Kirk begins in the video, I'm tired of fatalism. I'm tired of the defeatist mindsets. And it's like an old song, just climbed up on the roof and, or just climb up on the roof and ask to get raptured out of here. He quotes a song. And he says, I'm tired of this stuff. And it's like this old song, just climb up on the roof and ask to get raptured out of here. So, he's clearly portraying the same type of argument. It's a philosophical argument. And it's one that's encased in that the pre-trib rapture denies the power of the gospel. And I'm just going to spend just a minute on this because this is relevant to the scriptures that we're going to be reading today, the Old Testament scriptures that we'll be reading today. It says, many of the arguments against pre-trib rapture are wrapped in a morally superior philosophical objection. Okay, that's my conclusion after listening to these for decades now. However, if you look at it that way, if you look at the pre-trib rapture as morally inferior to basically any other eschatology position, and it is the one that gets attacked the most in that manner, but if you look at it that way, you have already judged the doctrine, regardless of what the scriptures say. And that's the cart pulling the horse. Most people will deny doing that, but think about it for a second. If I've determined that this doctrine is immoral, how can I possibly read the scriptures from an objective point of view? If I've determined something is evil, how can I read the scriptures with the possibility of saying, okay, well, maybe it's not evil? You can't, because you've already determined that it's evil, and that's a serious issue. And so they'll go on and they will make the claim not a single verse teaches the pre-trib rapture, which is saying that they know and understand properly every single passage in the Bible. This is a non-starter for me. If somebody comes up to me and says not a single verse teaches the pre-trib rapture, and they don't give any kind of context to it, they don't give any kind of qualification, like, well, it's my understanding, based on my understanding of the scriptures, none of them teach the pre-trib rapture. If they came to me and say that's great, that we can have a conversation. But if they just flat out blanket state, not a single verse teaches the pre-trib rapture, basically what they're saying is that they know and understand every single verse, every single passage in the Bible, and that their interpretation is infallible and they can't be wrong. And that's just a non-starter for me. And so you get to the point where they make that statement and then they talk about why it denies the power of the gospel. That also is a non-starter for me. And why? Because it's just simply not true. And why is it not true that we're denying the power of the gospel? Well, here's what they're saying. Okay? In other words, and this is mainly post-mill, by the way, on this particular one. But they're basically saying God is not going to judge the rest of the world for the continual, persistent rejection of the gospel and of the Lord Jesus Christ over the last 2,000 years. No, he is going to instead eventually make the entire world Christian through the power of the gospel. And to deny this, to deny that God is not going to judge the world and instead is going to eventually Christianize the entire world through the power of the gospel before he returns, to deny that is to deny the power of the gospel. And we run into all sorts of problems. So just let me blanket state, we do not deny the power of the gospel. What we deny is the assertion that God's plan is not to judge the whole world. That's what we deny. We deny what they're saying God's plan is. We believe the scriptures say that God is going to judge the whole world for the same sin that it judged Israel for in 70 AD. And in fact, the same promoters of this ideology are gung-ho to tell you about the rightful and just destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD as a result of the Jews' rejection of, are you ready for it? As a result of the Jews' rejection of the gospel. So, in one sense, they're saying that a pre-trib rapture and the premill doctrine itself denies the power of the gospel, and therefore, God is not going to destroy the earth, or is not going to judge the earth. But in the same breath, they will readily tell you that the power of the gospel failed to convert the Jews. And that's why 70 AD resulted. So by their same logic, the gospel was weak concerning the Jews. And according to their same logic, the gospel was weak concerning the Gentiles over the last 2,000 years because the world is not Christianized at this point. And they say, well, it's a slow process, and that's another story. But the gospel is not weak. Okay, the church adopting of the pre-trib rapture, they will say, is why the power of the gospel has been neutered. They will blame the situation that the church is in today, that the country is in today, that the world is in today, that it's not Christianized because of the pre-trib rapture. Somehow the power of the gospel, which is what they're promoting, actually isn't that powerful at all because the church can neuter it by having some false doctrine, what they call a false doctrine. So the power of the gospel has failed because men didn't properly spread it. And that doesn't make any sense either, because in the same breath, the pre-trib rapture was invented by Darby about 150 years ago. So then the question is, what happened over the 1,850 years before that? What was the excuse about the gospel not Christianizing, however you want to call it? What was the excuse during that period of time? And if the power of the gospel can be neutered by those who handle the gospel, then tell me why the Jews rejected the gospel as given from God incarnate himself. He didn't mishandle the gospel, and the Jews rejected the gospel. All right, so there's all sorts of, when you start putting man's philosophical, moral judgments onto a doctrine, and that's why you are against that doctrine, you run into all sorts of problems. And it happens all the time, right? So Jesus gave the gospel, he preached the kingdom to the Jews, and they rejected him. They killed him. They crucified him. Then, after his resurrection, they killed and crucified the disciples. They continued to reject the gospel being given by the closest followers of Christ. So let me give you something else. Let me give you a different view of this. There are no oops in the pre-trib. If the pre-trib rapture wasn't invented, many more would have come to Christ. That simply is not true. There are no oops in this scenario. If the pre-trib rapture wasn't invented, many more would have come to Christ. That is simply not true. I thank the Lord my salvation was not dependent on someone else's obedience. Okay, your salvation is not dependent on someone else's obedience, except the obedience of Christ, which was done at the cross. That's what your salvation is dependent on. Period. It is not. There are not people that are going to hell because I sinned. Right? God, otherwise, it would be my work that saves them. Makes no sense whatsoever. Right? So, even if the pre-trib rapture doctrine is not true, it cannot neuter the power of the gospel. So, in my view, they actually think that the power of the gospel is weaker than I believe it to be, because I believe that the gospel will reach every single person and convert every single person to whom it is supposed to convert. Everyone who is supposed to be saved will be saved. I am convinced of that one thing. So I actually think that the power of the gospel is more powerful than what they say it is. And it has nothing to do with the Pretrib Rapture, or pre-mill for that matter. Okay? So that puts us into, that's the introduction into the passage that we're going to read, because it all ties in, as you will see. So here's the question: was the idea of the pre-trib rapture an invention of Darby? That's the first question. And two, did it come from the scriptures? Did the idea of the pre-trib rapture come from the scriptures? And the answer is Darby did not invent the idea, and there are dozens of scriptures that support the idea. Dozens and dozens. And in this channel, however long it takes, I will continue to put out these videos. I have a list that is extremely long of videos that I want to put out based on my study of eschatology. Hopefully it will encourage some to, at minimum, dig into the Word. In none of these videos, and including in this one, will I tell you that there's no way that I'm wrong. I will not tell you that. I will not tell you that while I am 100% convinced that that is the doctrine, I will also tell you that I do not know every scripture. So this is my 100% conviction that this is correct is based on my limited understanding of the scriptures. I do not understand every passage in the Bible. I could be wrong about some of my interpretations of some of these passages. But I want to treat them as honestly as I possibly can. That means looking at every detail and acknowledging difficulties when there are difficulties. Dozens and dozens of scriptures, and we're going to just briefly touch on one. And the most convincing passage in the Old Testament that supports the pre-trib rapture idea, believe it or not, is Isaiah 24 through 26. Yes, full chapters. So we'll be looking at the context of Isaiah 24 and 26, and we're going to be digging down into some of the details. Now, obviously, with 2 chapters, we cannot dig into the details of every single verse. It's not the purpose of this. The purpose of going through Isaiah 24 through 26 is to provide context, and we're going to read the entirety of all 3 chapters as we get into the nitty-gritty here. All right, so here's the beginning of Isaiah 24, and I'll make comment after we get done with this chapter before we get to Isaiah 25. It says, verse 1, "Behold, the Lord makes the earth empty and makes it waste, distorts its surface and scatters abroad its inhabitants. And it shall be as with the people, so with the priest, as with the servant, so with his master, as with the maid, so with her mistress, as with the buyer, so with the seller, as with the lender, so with the borrower, as with the creditor, so with the debtor. The land shall be entirely emptied and utterly plundered. For the Lord has spoken this word. The earth mourns and fades away. The world languishes and fades away. The haughty people of the earth languish. The earth is also defiled under its inhabitants, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, broken the everlasting covenant. Therefore the curse has devoured the earth, and those who dwell in it are desolate. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men are left. The new wine fails, the vine languishes, all the merry-hearted sigh. The mirth of the tambourine ceases, the noise of the jubilant ends, the joy of the harp ceases. They shall not drink wine with a song. Strong drink is bitter to those who drink it. The city of confusion is broken down. Every house is shut up, so that none may go in. There is a cry for wine in the streets. All joy is darkened. The mirth of the land is gone. In the city desolation is left, and the gate is stricken with destruction. When it shall be thus in the midst of the land among the people, it shall be like the shaking of an olive tree, like the gleaning of grapes when the vintage is done. Continues on in verse 14. They shall lift up their voice, they shall sing for the majesty of the Lord. They shall cry aloud from the sea. Therefore glorify the Lord in the dawning light, the name of the Lord God of Israel in the coastlands of the sea. From the ends of the earth we have heard songs, glory to the righteous. But I said, I am ruined, ruined, woe to me. The treacherous dealers have dealt treacherously. Indeed, the treacherous dealers have dealt very treacherously. Fear and the pit and the snare are upon you, O inhabitant of the earth. And it shall be that he who flees from the noise of the fear shall fall into the pit, and he who comes up from the midst of the pit shall be caught in the snare. For the windows from on high are open, and the foundations of the earth are shaken. The earth is violently broken. The earth is split open. The earth is shaken exceedingly. The earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard, and shall totter like a hut. Its transgression shall be heavy upon it, and it will fall, and not rise again. It shall come to pass in that day that the Lord will punish on high the host of exalted ones, and on the earth the kings, plural, of the earth. They will be gathered together, as prisoners are gathered in the pit, and will be shut up in prison. And many days they will be punished. Then the moon will be disgraced, and the sun ashamed, for the Lord of hosts will reign on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, and before his elders gloriously. All right, so that's chapter 24. And there's a theme to this chapter, and it is a theme of judgment. And if you look at this, it is a judgment that knows no boundaries. It is not a judgment that it will only affect a certain group of people, a certain class of people, a single city, a single nation. It is going to cover everyone. And that is, it doesn't matter whether you're rich, it doesn't matter whether you're poor, you're not going to be able to come out from under this judgment. As with the people, so with the priest, as with the servant, with his master, as with the maid, so her mistress, as with the buyer, so the seller. Everyone, regardless of your status in society, on the earth, is going to suffer this judgment. And again and again, and a lot of, when certain groups will read this, and they'll say, well, this is talking about Israel, and this is talking about the judgment of 70 AD, or something like that. That's a far stretch, because what they will say is, well, the word earth can mean land. It can be interchanged with land, and that's absolutely true. It is absolutely true, but context dictates that, right? And so, for example, the land shall be entirely emptied and utterly plundered. Well, it's talking about Israel, is what they'll say. The earth mourns and fades away. Well, this word, earth, is the word that can be switched out with land. So this word, land, and earth are actually the same Hebrew word. And so it is often switched out, but this is not the same word. The world, in this, every time it's used, it means beyond any locality. It means the entirety of the inhabited world. All right, so this is a different Hebrew word, and you know that because there are the removal of boundaries that are in the passage. Okay, so for example, like I said earlier, it said kings of the earth. And it talks about the haughty, and it talks about those who transgress. This is not just an Israel thing. And if we come here, you can see the earth is violently broken. The earth is split open. The earth is shaken exceedingly. The earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard. That's not a city. That is not a country. This is talking about the very creation of the planet Earth, reeling to and fro like a drunkard, shall totter like like a hut. It is talking about the foundations of the earth. That is not speaking of a single city or a single country. There's just no way that somebody can be honest with this passage and say this is describing the tribulation of 70 AD. I'm sorry, it cannot be just limited to that. You have to completely take this out of context and change the meaning of plain language to try and confine this to a city or a country. And then there's the passage that says there will be few men on the earth. There will be few men that are left. Few men that are left. Well, I can go on for a long time about various passages that talk about this. So this is not a localized scenario. All right, so what you're getting in Isaiah 24 is the sense that there is going to be a worldwide judgment. And it even uses fire, the term fire in this judgment. And it's going to be catastrophic. It is not going to distinguish between any certain group of people. Everybody is going to be under this judgment, and everybody is going to suffer from this judgment. That's what Isaiah 24, that is the theme of Isaiah 24. And then you get to the end of Isaiah 20, and I just love this. I love this in verse 23, for the Lord of hosts will reign on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem and before his elders gloriously. Despite this judgment, Christ will reign on Mount Zion, and he will reign in Jerusalem and before his elders gloriously. So in spite of all the judgment, the chapter, even though there weren't chapters back then, but this theme is given hope at the end here. There is hope in the midst of this judgment, which is going to be elaborated on as we get into chapter 25. So the theme is destruction, the theme is judgment, and it's worldwide judgment. That's the theme of Isaiah 24. And then though some will admit, no, that's not Israel. This is not Israel, but it's also not talking about the end of the world. This is just talking about judgments in general. As countries become wicked, then God judges them and things like nature. Well, we'll see about that. Let's go on to verse 25. It says, chapter 25. It says, O Lord, you are my God. I will exalt you. I will praise your name, for you have done wonderful things. Your counsels of old are faithfulness and truth. For you have made a city a ruin, a fortified city a ruin, a palace of foreigners to be a city no more. It will never be rebuilt. Therefore the strong people will glorify you. The city of the terrible nations, plural, will fear you. For you have been a strength to the poor, a strength to the needy in his distress, a refuge from the storm, a shade from the heat. For the blast of the terrible ones is as a storm against the wall. You will reduce the noise of aliens as heat in a dry place, as heat in the shadow of a cloud. The song of the terrible ones will be diminished. Now I'm going to stop there for just a second, because you have to read this as if there's no chapter break. So from chapter 24, it ends with, for the Lord of hosts will reign on Mount Zion and Jerusalem and before his elders gloriously. And then it goes on and talks about the things that are going to happen and are happening during that time. You have been a strength to the poor, a strength to the needy in distress, a refuge from the storm, a shade from the heat. So there is peace somewhere in there for some people. Right? You will reduce the noise of aliens in the heat of dry place. So the wicked are all going to be reduced here. In his reign, the wicked are going to be reduced here. All right, so the song of the terrible ones will be diminished. So now we're starting to see a little bit of separation between the whole earth, which there was nothing, there were no exclusions in chapter 24, and now you're starting to see some exclusions that comes right after the passage that says that Jesus is going to reign, right? And then going on in verse 6, and in this mountain the Lord of hosts will make for all people a feast of choice pieces, a feast of wines on the lees, of fat things full of marrow, of well-refined wines on the lees. And he will destroy on this mountain the surface of the covering cast over all people, the veil that is spread over all nations. He will swallow up death forever, and the Lord God will wipe away tears from all faces. The rebuke of his people he will take away from all the earth. For the Lord has spoken, and it will be said in that day, Behold, this is our God. We have waited for him, and he will save us. This is the Lord. We have waited for him. So you have the destruction of the world, you have the diminishing of the wicked, and then you have the glorious exaltation of his people. Is the theme and the progression of Isaiah 25 and 26. But we're not done in the last couple of verses. For on this mountain the hand of the Lord will rest, and Moab shall be trampled down under him, as straw is trampled down for the refuse heap. And he will spread out his hands in the midst as a swimmer reaches out to swim. And he will bring down their pride together with their trickery of their hands. The fortress of the high fort will of your walls he will bring low, lay low, and bring to the ground, down to the dust. Right, so chapters 24 and 25 are describing a great destruction upon the earth. You see this resume here at the end of 25 as kind of a confirmation. But the progression is chapter 24 is mainly focused on the destruction. Then you have at the end of chapter 24 the reign of Christ, and then you have the diminishing of the wicked, and then you have the exaltation of his people, and a confirmation that the wicked in fact will drop. And moreover, one other thing that I kind of passed over a little bit, again, I don't have time to go into this in all of its detail. This is just setting up the context, is all this is doing, all right? But it says, he will destroy in this mountain the surface of the covering cast over all people, and the veil that is spread over all nations. What veil is spread over all nations? Well, the fact that all nations essentially, and for all practical purposes, to this day and for the last 2,000 years, with a few exceptions of small periods of time for certain countries, outside of that, there's been a veil that has been cast over all the nations. They have continued to deny the gospel. They have continued to deny Christ. They have continued to reject the gospel. They have continued to reject Christ. And that's going to be gone. All right, so I'll just put that into your mind because I'll deal with that more in later videos. But that is the context of Isaiah 24 and 25. Now we're going to go into Isaiah 26. It says, in that day. What day? The day where all of this is happening. The day of destruction. The day that the Lord comes to Jerusalem to reign. In that day, this song will be sung in the land of Judah. We have a strong city. God will appoint salvation for walls and bulwarks, and open the gates. The righteous nation which keeps the truth may enter in. You will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you, because he trusts in you. Trust in the Lord forever, for in Yah the Lord is everlasting strength. For he brings down those who dwell on high. The lofty city he lays low. He lays it low to the ground. He brings it down to the dust. The foot shall tread it down, the feet of the poor and the steps of the needy. Lord, you will establish peace for us, for you have also done all our works in us. Think about that verse for a minute. Going on, 13, O Lord our God, masters beside you have had dominion over us. Masters besides you have had dominion over us. The wicked, okay? That's who they're talking about. But by you only we make mention of your name. They are dead. Who? Who's dead? They are dead. Who's dead? The masters besides you that have had dominion over us. They are dead. They will not live. They are deceased. They will not rise. Therefore you have punished and destroyed them and made all their memory to perish. And you have increased the nation, O Lord, you have increased the nation. You are glorified. You have expanded all the borders of the land. Lord, in trouble they have visited you. They poured out a prayer when your chastening was upon them, as a woman with child is in pain and cries out in her pangs. When she draws near the time of her delivery, so have we been in your sight, O Lord. We have been with child, we have been in pain, we have, as it were, brought forth wind. We have not accomplished any deliverance in the earth. All of our efforts to accomplish our own deliverance have failed, is what he's saying, what this passage is saying. Nor have the inhabitants of the world fallen, again based on their accomplishments. Okay, this is the beginning of Isaiah 26. And now we're going to start to get into the nitty-gritty. In the next verse, which is 19. Okay, here's verse 19. Your dead shall live. Together with my dead body, they shall arise. Awake and sing, you who dwell in dust, for your dew is like the dew of herbs, and the earth shall cast out the dead. All right, so we now have a comparison, is the word I'll use, a comparison of a group of people in chapter 26 that will not rise. In verse 14, they are dead. They will not live. They are deceased. They will not rise. And then you come to verse 19 and it says, your dead shall live. So they are dead. He doesn't say you're dead, right? So he's making a contrast here between two separate groups of dead people. They are dead. They will not live. Your dead shall live. And this is absolutely, no doubt, talking about the resurrection. And it's made absolutely clear by the clarification that he gives. Your dead shall live. Right? Not spiritual. This is physical. Your dead shall live together with my dead body. My dead body. Let me pull out my drawing thing, if you will. So my dead body. Okay, whose dead body? The person who's writing this prophecy, right? The person who's giving this prophecy, the person who this prophecy was given to. My dead body. Your dead shall live together with my dead body. I am among those who will be considered your dead, because they shall live together with my dead body. They shall arise. Along with my dead body, we all shall arise. Awake and sing, you who dwell in the dust. That's physically dead. Their bodies are dwelling in the dust. That's physical death. For your dew is like the dew of herbs. And the earth, not the land, not a country, not a city, the entirety of the earth shall cast out the dead. Not this group of dead, because it says they will not live. All right, now context is important. We know that from other passages, the wicked will live. right? But their living is called the second death, all right? But in the context of this, he's just making a comparison between two people and what? And what? In that day. Right? Now, there are groups of eschatological beliefs that believe that there is only one resurrection, that both the righteous and the wicked will be resurrected at the same time. But the chapter in Isaiah 26 starts with, in that day. And so it is making a comparison of what is going on in that day. And in that day, the wicked will not rise. That is not when they will rise. But in that day, your dead shall live. They will rise. Okay? So this right here is proof positive that chapters 24 and 25, because that's what's being referred to in verse 1, in that day is referring to the day that is being discussed in chapters 24 and 25. In that day, your dead shall live. So this is not talking about countries from time to time as they rebel and reject God, that God brings judgment upon them. And so, in 200 AD, God brought some judgment upon certain countries for their rebellion. And then in 500 AD, another set of countries, and then the plague to another set of countries, and so forth and so forth. That makes no sense, because this is tying the events of that day to the resurrection of the righteous. There is no question. You have to do all sorts of damage to this verse to make this not about the resurrection of the righteous. And then you have to do all sorts of damage to this verse to say that this is not referring to physically rising of the wicked. The context is clearly making a contrast between these two groups of people. One shall rise physically, literally from the dead. The righteous will rise in that day, and in that day the wicked will not rise. Okay? All right, now we have the context for the verses that are, in my opinion, some of the most compelling verses that support the pre-trib rapture, because of the context that is given in chapter 24, 25, and then specifically in 26, in this juxtaposing of these two groups of people. We have a time frame. We have who is being referred to here. It is the dead who shall live. They shall rise. Awake and sing, you who dwell on the earth. Your dead, your people, they shall rise. And then it goes on. There's a couple of more verses. And what do these verses say? They say, come, my people. Enter your chambers and shut your doors behind you. Hide yourself, as it were, for a little moment until the indignation is past. For behold, the Lord comes out of his place to punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity. The earth will also disclose her blood and will no more cover her slain. This is just a fascinating passage, because when you couple it with chapter 24 and 25, and you talk about the indignation, which is talking about chapter 24, that's the subject matter, and then there's an instruction, and it says, come, my people. Now, when is this instruction given? It's given after verse 19. And what happens in verse 19? Your dead shall live. Who are my people? My people are the dead who shall live. Right? The dead who shall live. Your dead shall live. Come, my people. Same group. And it comes immediately after they have risen from the dead. So first, they rise from the dead, then God gives them a command. Come, my people, enter your chambers and shut your doors behind you. Hide yourself, as it were, for a little moment until the indignation has passed. They are risen from the dead, and they are hidden away. They are hidden away from what is going on. All right, so come, my people. They've risen from the dead. Now enter your chambers. And why will you be entering your chambers? To escape. Right? And they hate that word. To escape the indignation. Because the Lord comes out of his place to punish the inhabitants of the earth. There is judgment coming when it is connected to the resurrection. This is really difficult for the post-mill group, who will tell you that the world is not going to be judged in this massive great tribulation, but rather through the power of the gospel, the world is going to be converted before Christ returns. But you just don't see that in these passages. This is a very strong indication that the pre-trib rapture is exactly what so many of the other references, the other passages in Scripture are alluding to. That there's going to be this time of great judgment, and it's called chastening in chapter 25 and 26 to Israel, right? It's their chastening, but for the rest of the world, it's their judgment, and to some degree, it is also judgment on Israel. But yeah, that goes into a whole nother story. Nevertheless, first the resurrection from the dead, then the command to hide themselves. Why? Because the Lord is about to come out of his place and do everything that they just read about in chapter 24. And punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity. So it is absolutely crystal clear that this is the resurrection of the dead, and it makes for a very strong argument that verse 20 is referring to a pre-trib rapture, a pre-trib resurrection of the dead, of the righteous, that will escape the indignation, the punishment that God is going to bring upon the entire earth. This cannot be, chapter 25, chapter 24, cannot be something that has happened in the past, because the resurrection of the righteous has not occurred. And the chapter starts with "in that day." So it's giving us a connection between the two time periods. All right, now, I'm not going to go any further into that. I'm going to let it sit the way it is, except for one reference, because what I will be doing in additional videos is I will be showing you how consistent the Scriptures are about this. I mean, example after example after example after example. This is the picture that we're given, if you will see it. This is the picture that is given. And so I'm going to give you one passage where there's a connection here, or a possible connection, all right? And that is John chapter 14. "Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions." Now, the Greek word is very similar to the Hebrew word where it says chambers. It's a place of dwelling. It's not necessarily a mansion. It's just simply a place of dwelling. Some interpretations have it as rooms. There are many rooms, and that's fine. It can be mansions. It can be house. There are many houses. It can be rooms. It's a dwelling place. And that's the same general idea that is given with the Hebrew word that is interpreted as chambers. It's a dwelling place. It's almost like a bed chamber. It's where you rest. It's where you are at peace. It's where you are safe, right? It's a dwelling place. And it says in my Father's house. Where? In my Father's house. There are many mansions. If it were not so, I would not have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself. Now, look at this. What's the word here? Come. Where's God? Where's he saying for the people to go? He's not saying go into your house. He's saying come, my people, enter in to your chamber. Come where I am and enter into your chambers. I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also, and where I go you know, and the way you know. There is a consistency between Isaiah 26 verses 20 and John chapter 14 verses 2 and 3. And that's just one. And there are literally dozens and dozens. And so I'm going to leave you with that. I will tell you that every time that I've given this passage to somebody, there's been no response as to how my interpretation might be off. It doesn't mean that it's not off. My interpretation could be off. I'm trying to be as honest with the text as I can be. I'm trying to be consistent with it. But I would love if you have a scriptural-based reason why this is not what it sounds like it is, right? From the context of chapter 24 and 25 and 26. If it's not what it sounds like it is, and there's something in the text and in the context that indicates that, and not a presupposition, I would absolutely like to see it. So put it in the comments. If you're going to be condescending and rude, don't even bother. I won't even respond to it. But if you have an honest assessment that there's something off about this interpretation of this particular passage, I would love to see it, because I have yet to see anyone respond to the text itself and to the context itself. All right, so I'll end this one for now, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video.